All good?
All good.
Awesome. So thank you for your invitation. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. And I really actually wanted to be there in person with Rich to see the new place, but I guess that will happen sometime in the future. And now, Rich, you said many things about me, so you set up some expectations. So I hope that I can match the expectation. Um, set the title as Cultivating Peace. Probably one simple reason is that Americans are in need of peace. And also, personally, peace was my life's goal. So ever since when I was 15, uh, all I wanted in my life was having inner peace. And all my research, my cultivation, my study, meditation was in kind of my effort to achieve peace. So if you ask me, have you achieved peace? Answer is yes and no. I can share that why it's yes and no a little later. So a little bit of my life story that could help you to understand why I was interested or attracted to peace is that I lived probably the most dysfunctional family life ever found in Korea with the family. I mean, there are those who are living or growing up without family, much worse than my case. I cannot say mine was the worst, but mine was very dysfunctional. Uh, I lived only with my parents 2 years in my life. They got divorced. After that, probably I lived with my mother present in the same house 4 years altogether. The remaining years, I lived here and there, some different families, my maternal grandparents, paternal grandparents. So I found myself having this existential crisis question when I was 6. My question to myself was, why was I born? What am I doing here? Should I live? Should I go back to the house that's empty or not? That's when I was living with my grandmother, my father's mother, and who was a very bitter lady because her son divorced already twice. And in her mind, my mother ruined her son's glorious career in life. And then not only that, her husband, my grandfather, was having an affair, so was never home. So this lady who was born and raised in a very wealthy and high-class Korean family is now feeling doomed with this grandchild that she had to take care of. And for that, she would only eat like one meal a day, 2 meals a day sometimes. And that's how often I would eat when I was 4 to maybe 11, something like that. So anyway, just fast forwarding, fast forwarding. So then I moved to my maternal grandmother's house, and I discovered that my dad was actually the devil. So I was raised in this two different family. One side is saying my mom's poor. The other family is saying my dad is the demon devil. So basically, I'm a child of devil and the whore. That was my internal image of myself when I was a teenager, which gave me very stormy and dark teenage life because I wasn't sure that I could become a good person. I felt that's impossible. And another impossibility I felt is that cultivating peace, because my heart, mind was always filled with this anger, but that was burning by disappointment, abandonment, and also there's a little bit of vanity. And so all these are feeling and kind of making me angry. And that's when I met my first teacher, Confucius. So I'm also Confucianist. So I studied Confucius first, and what Confucius convinced me is that, you know what, it is possible. If you are a human being, and if that's something that a human being cultivate, you can cultivate it too. Only thing you need to decide is either want to cultivate it or not. Because if I give up, nothing happens. If I pursue it, there could be possibility. So asking about peace and cultivating peace, you may think that there are actually two different big categories of peace that I discovered too. One is peace outside of your country, your community, your family. Um, we cannot say America is peaceful right now, though we don't have a war, but we have other wars or battles happening all over America right now. Then there is your internal peace, peace within yourself. So which one's more important? In the beginning, it probably both are important and both are overwhelming, right? And for me, very almost as a destiny, my outside world was not peaceful either because Korea was ruled by this military generals, tyrants. And one of them actually sent special force to my hometown, Gwangju, when I was 11 on May 18th and opened fire at civilians. According to the government, they killed 2,000. According to my people, over 10,000 people were killed. I don't think we have correct number till today or this day yet. So outside was that there was this crisis, chaos, and also within myself there was chaos and crisis. So that was my teenage life, and that's when I encountered my first teacher, Confucius. And Confucius gave me that simple advice about, yes, you can change yourself. You may not be able to change the world yet, but you can change yourself. And that led me to another practice that I entered was the uh, meditation. So I started meditation when I was 15. And meditation, you know what first thing I did, what the book says to do? It says actually, in order to meditate, you need to be able to sit still. So first advice was that sit still every day for 15 minutes at a set time. And believe me, that was the hardest thing to me. As a 15 years old angry boy who sitting still and not moving and doing nothing I was sweating. And that's kind of I developed this skill of meditation, and that became half an hour, and when I reached 2 hours, the book suggested now you can meditate, so breathing and then focusing. So combining these two philosophy or teachings together, next thing, so if you're interested in now cultivating peace, right? So first step that I learned from my life is that one, you need to acknowledge that it is possible. If you already say it's not possible, then nothing happens. The next step then is both Buddhism and Confucianism teaches is that ability to see things as they are. You need to cultivate there's a certain ability that you see yourself as who you are. This is really hard, right? Because there are so many of myself that I found within. There is the one that I hope to be. There is the one that I felt like me. There's one that my mother used to tell me as me. There's me that the other people telling me as me. And then there probably was still yet another one was undiscovered. Which one's really me? So Buddhism also that's why talking about that everything is creation of your own mind. So and then the scripture reading that Psalm actually warns about delusions and believing in false gods. We do all these things probably because we're not seeing things as they are. So seeing things as they are requires overcoming my own presumptions, prejudices, my own hopeful expectations, even my own desires. Then our eyes could be cleared out and hopefully could see what it is. And the next one, after if you achieve now, it's possible you have your way of seeing things. I can't say that anyone can do it 100%, but if you are able to do it to a certain degree. The third step is now you need to form your own core. Again, in both Buddhism and Confucianism, they have certain concept or teaching about unshakables. Like Confucius teaches about life growth, and like at 15 he made his mind to study, and at 30 he was able to stand by himself, independent. At 40 he was able to say no or unshakable by all these desires, contempt. He got his core. In Buddhism, there is this concept about not moving, kind of very similar thing. You become like crystallized diamond so that you are not breakable and moved by any delusions coming to you. And this formation of core also is related to probably discovering, developing your own true self, who you really are. What is it that you really want to become? What are your core? So that's the formation. Again, it goes back and forth between seeing things as they are, then formation of your core. Seeing yourself who you really are, then formation of your core. And the last one, or last stage, is humility and harmony. Interestingly, this is when I can share with you that I felt like I achieved my inner peace when I was like 31. And then I got married and I experienced my inner peace broken and shattered in pieces completely. It's gone. And then I have a son and it's even broken in even smaller pieces. And then whole entire world of fear and anxiety came to me and welcomed. Why? I mean, right? You don't worry about yourself. Of course not, probably, but you worry for your loved. Like I get to worry about my wife's, safety and health. Then there's my son and daughter, three people I love. So there's a vulnerability and also there's a humility. You don't control. You somehow have, but you have to somehow harmonize. You have to simply go with the flow of life and you have to accept what is coming and even accept the pain that you have to endure. But certain pain, you don't try to erase them or delete them. You just endure them because these are pain because it comes to you, you love someone. I mean, that's my way. So that's my humility and the harmony comes in. So, interesting thing about the New Testament is that Jesus is teaching us about he didn't come to give us peace, but the sword. But if you connect that to the Old Testament, sword symbolizes truth. And if you, then there's a delusion, there's a false faith that we do have. So what Jesus meant by, in a way, is that there are degrees of peace that we can cultivate. If we want to cultivate peace that only satisfies my ego, that's easy. You just create a delusion, strong delusion, believe in it, you're all good. Everything's safe. Or the other thing you could try is that that's what I did when I was young, is that you eliminate all your emotions, meaning suppress them, and lock them into dungeon inside your heart. You don't feel anything. You're immune. Therefore, you are in peace. But these are not real peace. They're delusions. The real peace has to be inclusive of all things that happens in life, meaning it has to be cultivated through the truth. And truth is like sword, it hurts. So suitable, therefore, now getting into suitable for you a little bit, the proprium. The word proprium is an interesting concept, but in a very simple way, proprium is something that we want to be us within the world that is created by God. Like a very interesting joke that my teacher, George Aftel, there was a scholar, George Aftel, he was my teacher, and he used to tell me this. He told me this joke like about 20 times that I remember. So, uh, like, in an advanced future, there came this scientist that he now is a genius and he got all the technology. He came to confront God and saying that, hey, God, I can make everything with this claim. Look at this. You know what God said to him? Okay, now go and create your own clay. So, thing is, we are living in this entire reality that is God provided, even our core, ourself. Yet we want to be me. I want to be me. And I want to have ownership of myself and even privacy. And that's in a way proprium. So proprium in itself is not a bad thing, but it could cause big problems because it could cause the delusion and illusion to the end that I may be God. Look at me. I could do this much. The pain comes when this illusion meets the truth. Truth is also sword, but also the light, and it shines the darkness and reveals that that's a delusion. Now, if we want to move from delusion to reality, there's a pain in this transformation. And after we reach to this true reality, we are in peace. So that's in a way why Jesus was mentioning that and why I chose the proprium as that. So now I guess about time to summarize it, right? So cultivating peace, the wisdom that I learned from Confucian and Buddhistic tradition, also but in this biblical tradition, is very simple in a way. Peace outside of you is at times beyond your power. Therefore, it's actually better to cultivate peace within you first. When you have peace within yourself, you could become true instruments of peace to others. But if you try to bring peace outside of you first, what you often do is expressing your anger to others. Or in a better situation, your righteousness upon others. Or even a little better, you are telling people what to do. And those things usually do not succeed. Why? In this world, everybody has belief that they are right. So peace begins within you first. Then you become instrument of peace. Or at least that's my life story. Thank you for listening. I think that's about 15 minutes or so.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to open it up for questions. I have some of my own, but I want to see if anybody has a first question or a comment. See a heart from Lynn. Robert?
You know, I have something to say. I'll try to keep it brief. The first thing that comes to mind earlier on in your talk was a line from Edmund Burke, uh, who said, "The mass of men's misery comes from the inability to sit in a quiet room alone." And that was your first task in learning how to
Yes.
find inner peace. And according to him, that's where most of our problems come from. The busy mind, always coming up with schemes and new problems to solve. Um, Also, just very quickly in terms of proprium, because you mentioned this, a sense of ownership. And this is a strange word in Latin, and it's generally translated as one's own, which makes very little sense to an American or an English speaker. But it's the root word for many other terms, such as property and appropriate and what's right for me. And it's that sense of, as Friedrich says, a sense of independent, self-existent life where we claim that we own. It's our life is our own. We possess it. We can do what we want with it. And that's, as you say, the chief delusion. I also tell people with the proprium does not hallucinate. There's a real world out there. If we're just not seeing it clearly, we're seeing only a relation. Is it good for me? Is it bad for me? Instead of what it is. So again, thank you so much for your journey that you shared with us. That's what I got.
Lynn?
Junchol, beautiful. I just really appreciate that. Thanks, Rich, for hosting. Thank you, everyone that's being of service today. I want to say that Junchol, I started meditating at 17, and same thing. It was so challenging. And I have to say, Swedenborg came when I was about 25, and I read Swedenborg about these inner experiences because there was a lot of stirrings. But I learned to chant through the Buddhist tradition. And I'm just curious if you've ever used sound in any of your meditations. I know you do at church, but you know, Junchol, for everyone that knows, was one of my first teachers. Jim Lawrence sent me over to the San Francisco church, and Junchol was my first teacher. And I was so excited because I had studied about natural foods, and the Asian, community was very rich for me. And when he said he was a Buddhist, a Taoist, and a Christian, I felt so welcomed because I was like, I had studied all those so rich, and it really helped me. But I really loved the part about, confronting God with a claim. And I was reading proprium this morning around humility. So it's so serendipitous about, I bought this really beautiful little statue and I've called her humility, and I'm doing my summer talk on humility now. And I'm very happy to say that I feel very very excited about this word. And thank you, Robert, for clarifying some of that, because that's what I was going to look up, where does this word come from? So anyway, thank you, Junchol, for everything. I love your teachings. They were very precious to me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jose or Katie?
Yeah, it's Jose. I had a question really. I too have also have been really interested in and attracted to Confucianism. Um, not necessarily as a religion, because there's no revealed word per se, but as a certainly as a code of ethics to follow. And I wonder how we how you know our visiting pastor like reconciles the Confucian idea of filial piety, and how loyalty and love and support of the family, and even broader than that of the state, like helps to guide us to be better people, with the reading we had from Matthew, where Jesus is saying, basically throw everyone aside. If you love them, your parents, more than me, that is the wrong way of behaving. And I was always conflicted about that particular part of Matthew, because in a sense it seems very unchristian to me. No pun intended, but it's always been a conflict to me, the parts where he is saying, I am the only light, I am the only way, with the rest of his philosophy where he's sacrificing himself to everyone. I would just appreciate any thoughts about that.
Sure, absolutely. Uh, I wish I have a lot more time, but I probably I can summarize it in a brief way. Um, One thing that I noticed after I came to US and seriously studying theology and also biblical studies is that somehow my American or Western friends are taking Bible too much literal, even though they are saying that these are teachings from God incarnate, yet they are only reading it in a very single dimensional. For instance, if we go to Eastern way, even Buddhist scriptures, nobody read those scriptures literally. They always try to understand them as a door, gateway to deeper thoughts. But somehow Western thoughts taught probably that way. So my personal take is that I read entire Bible, especially Gospels, as the mystical teachings which has in-depth meanings. And that's probably how we're supposed to approach them. So that because if it's God incarnated, God would not do such a terrible thing about you should hate your mom and dad and your children and abandon them. Otherwise, you're not worthy. But that scripture itself has a certain setting about, and there is this key word about being worthy of God incarnate. That itself shows something different than everything. So how you become worthy of God incarnate versus just a follower, versus just a disciple. You're truly worthy of that. So it describes, now I'm going to apply a little bit of Buddhistic interpretation, is that it applies higher, deeper connection with this God incarnate. You're truly becoming one with this being. In order to become like that, probably you have to either evolve or transcend what this world says as important. Now, about the Confucian way, is Confucian way also, there is actually Confucius' philosophy, and then there are a lot of things that Chinese government or Chinese scholars were serving emperors, trying to make them as the governing system or governing systematic philosophy. And they are not exactly identical. Confucius himself did not really talk about like loyalty to the kings or emperors. Confucius was focusing on your your own core and creating and believing and even understanding what it means to be truly human. And he connects that to actually loving each other, benevolence, accepting, loving, sharing. And he was actually living in this very chaotic world too. So that's very brief version of it.
Wonderful. Well, I found really interesting in your comments describing the sword that Jesus is waving and saying, I bring a sword, is a sword of cutting through our illusions and waking us up to who we really are and how difficult that is. And of course, we don't really want to do that. We'd like to live in our delusions of our delusions of grandeur of who we are. And the spiritual life is really about cutting that next level of growth, which is always painful. So I really appreciated that. I had a question for you, a different question. Though I love Jose's that question, made it very provocative. My question was going back to a more personal question. In your life story, that's a pretty horrible upbringing that you described, and so the environment around you is really very negative. The question I had though was, you found Confucius, you did this, you're 15, you're meditating. When did you shift, and also when did Christianity come on the scene, and why? Like why did you shift it to that after these other things? Just curious about that, the shift that for a 15-year-old that you made to becoming a pastor and a Christian pastor.
Okay, so again, very short version, right? So I was also actually attending church when I was 15, and I was a youth leader too. And some of you heard my story, but I was confronting the church authority, youth pastor, even head minister, even entire press release coming. Issue about all my ancestors are being in hell. And somehow after argument, we had series of arguments, because then at the last one was there was head minister, youth pastor, the first presby, second presby, basically all the leaders of the church gathered around the five of them. Now we're talking. And at the end of an hour conversation or argument, I kind of said that, like, you know what, I don't want to go to heaven, I want to go to hell, because that's where my family are. And then I was demon possessed, and then I did receive the full exorcism for that. Anyway, so that made me like to leave the church actually. So I left kind of Christian church like when I was 17. So time passes like quite long, and when I was about 23, I came to the United States, and that's when I met Heejoung Moon for the first time. My uncle and aunt were having a little worship service in their basement, New York, Bayside, New York, and I was introduced to Dolls Note, and it was like fascinating. So I went to a place called Bernathen, and I studied Swedenborgian religion there. And book by book, I was reading it, but also I was memorizing it to a degree because my English was so poor. How poor you cannot imagine, because I could not understand the question on the test. So
Mhm.
what I did is that I memorized the entire book, and I would write a whole paragraph that include a word in the question.
Mm.
The teacher was giving me A for that, and that was heaven and hell. So that's where it kind of turning point happened. That as I was reading heaven and hell, and then divine love and wisdom and divine providence, I felt that if God is this much understanding and God is actually love like this, I could try. So that made me to actually apply to Heejoung School of Religion. That's our older seminary. And then I think that's when I had my vision, my calling. So all
Beautiful.
that. Yeah, that itself could be a long story.
No,
That's the time.
no, you did a great job of making a life story concise, and I appreciate it. That's a really interesting transformation. I should just add for folks, the Dole notes are like a Sunday school system of notes that go into the inner meaning. It sounds like that's a big thing for you, is discovering this inner meaning of Scripture was transformative for you. And I didn't know that in the Eastern churches, for example, that they look at the scriptures at the spiritual or at a deeper level, symbolic
Mhm.
level, not a literal level. And I know Swedenborg says that the angels do that in heaven, that they don't look at it at a literal level. So maybe they are already closer to heaven than those of us in the West. But thank you so much for your great thing, Sue. If you have a quick question, we can squeeze one more in. And you want to unmute, Sue? Want to unmute?
Question about chanting that
Okay, we'll go Sue and Ross, but you have to be both be very brief.
Okay. Junchol, I appreciate so much your sharing your personal childhood. I also had a very tragic childhood, and I too then looked to exploring religions, trying to make some sense out of life. I didn't choose Eastern religions, but I became a Quaker for a while, and then Baha'i, and then I actually was part of the Shaker movement for a while. So I really had that same quest for an inner reality, and came upon Swedenborg at Kemper Road Center when I was 24, and it just fit as the truth to me. But anyway, I appreciate your sharing your story. Thank you.
And thank you, Sue, for sharing your story. Ross, did you have a quick question
well,
about
I
chant?
just wondered if you wanted to answer the question that Reverend Chittick asked about his use of chanting.
Oh yeah. Do you want to address that?
Sure. So, by all means, I'm not a singer, so but I actually listen the sounds. So when I meditate, if I could, I go to the streams in the middle of the forest, listening to the wind and the sound of the water. If I cannot do that, then I would play them. Or sometimes another thing that I just enjoy is the sound of the chimes and the gongs that played by the Buddhist monks. So I used to have those things in my computer and in the CDs.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for engaging in our dialogue today. We really appreciate that. Lots of wisdom, lots of provocative thinking, and great discussion.